And then I decided, well, what the heck? So I wrote an op-ed. This isn't on the record, but sure. Key to grant applications is being extremely thorough. The idea of microtransit is, providing these services, especially to more lower income communities or individuals, but not exclusively, certainly.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back onto the podcast. I am your host, Michael Ornak, aka Trumi. We've been coordinating this episode for a while now and have finally made it happen. Tate Coleman, everyone. He is a Microtransit program director for the Tri-Town Connector in Great Barrington. He is also a valuable target employee and currently getting his master's degree in civil engineering at UMass. He's got big dreams in the realm of transportation, so do stay tuned. Tate, welcome.
Thank you, Michael.
So I like to start off every episode with some sort of icebreaker.
Okay.
It's always the same icebreaker, but give me the average day in the life for Tate Coleman.
Average day in the life.
And you have a very versatile life, but
I know, it's hard to... Let's see. Well, it usually consists of checking in with my staff down in Great Barrington first thing. Then I often end up going to classes or doing coursework. And then a couple afternoons a week, I work at Target in the front end. And then I do a little more work, maybe have a fun time in the evening, and it's a full-packed day. So,
do you have any sort of strategies for balancing your workload?
Yeah, I mean, I do not have a smartphone, which helps tremendously. I don't have those distractions all the time. No extra notifications. I put my phone on silent a lot of the time. And that's the only way to stay focused at this, this day and age. So
I'm with you. So some context to the audience. Tate and I, Tate was my graduate mentor over the summer. I did in RAU, and at the time I had a little Kindle flip phone, sort of like Tate's, same minimalist vibe. And when he pulled it out, it's very rare you see someone. So I definitely do applaud you for that. It's not easy, especially in this day and age.
Thank you, and it was remarkable to see a fellow non-smartphone user at that point.
I know.
But
so
it was great. Yeah. Thank you.
There's maybe not for the past 30, 40 years, microtransit is becoming more prevalent, right?
Yes.
First of all, if you could tell us what microtransit is.
Sure. So microtransit. So just to give a general idea, microtransit falls within the realm of public transit services. So many of you here at UMass might know public transit as the B43 bus or the Route 30 or one of these buses that fills up really, with a lot of students. Well, in a lot of lower density areas, places with less people and more space, those type of services become less ideal or less efficient to run. So if you only have 2 or 3 people getting on in 1 hour, it doesn't really make sense to run a scheduled route every hour in that case. So microtransit is kind of like a shared ride Uber or Lyft. So it's a shared ride on-demand service, usually with a component where you can book a ride like a couple days in advance, but generally on request, either using a smartphone app or the predecessor to Microtransit was Dial a Ride, which did not include any sort of features with the smartphone or computer algorithms. But what has made microtransit so much more popular today, as opposed to the traditional service that you would call and it would come and pick you up and drop you off where you wanted, Actually a lot more convenient on the operations side of things and a lot cheaper to run, because now you can have your users input their own rides into their phones or on the computer. And some people may definitely still call in, but then the computer can auto-generate based on the driver's schedule. They can auto-generate the trips and the route for the day for the driver. And so in lower density areas, such as where I am working in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, we serve about 100 square miles with a population of about 15,000. So, this is really spread out. And a lot of the people aren't going the same place as everybody else. And so, you might have people 10 miles apart, and there's no way to route a bus to serve those locations consistently, and there's no real point. So, we have one village, for example, in southern Berkshire County, which is where Great Barrington is. It's just west of where we are here, about an hour. We have one village that has had hourly bus service for the past few decades, and it has less than one rider a day in each direction. And that is a perfect case of where microtransit can come into play. So you're not wasting gas going out there every hour, but instead you're making it probably more convenient for the one person who uses it, because they can call or request a ride on their smartphone and book it to come when they want, instead of it just running out whether or not somebody is interested in getting a ride.
Yeah, and it's also a lot more affordable than Uber or Lyft.
Oh, yes, thank you. So it is public transit, which in general is subsidized. And the idea of microtransit is, providing these services, especially to more lower income communities or individuals, but not exclusively, certainly, and also our senior populations, as well as anybody else who's interested. But it provides an affordable cost of our services, $2 a ride, and it usually ranges between, say, $1 and $4 a ride around the country. So it's a lot less than, say, an Uber ride or a taxi ride in our southern Berkshire County. Just to go a few miles can cost upwards of $50.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge difference in terms of affordability. Thank you.
And what's the process like of subsidizing microtransit?
Yeah, so I can just speak for the program that I manage. It's funded through a number of sources, including state, local, federal funding. The most common is probably federal and state funds. Usually fares, what you pay to get on board, usually don't account for a very high percentage of the true cost of the ride, especially in a spread out area. This is the case all around the country, but it might account for 5 to 10% of what your actual costs are. So it's usually funded through the Federal Transit Administration and or the Department of Transportation in the state. And usually the money that funds these programs has specific priority populations. Like they might say, oh, we really need, you really need to emphasize service to seniors if you're going to take this money.
Sure.
Or workforce. We have funding from the Office of Workforce Development from the state of Massachusetts, and we also get funding through the Federal Transit Administration that's geared towards seniors and persons with disabilities. And there are similar services around the Commonwealth, or around Massachusetts, and also around the country. And I know around here that is a typical way to fund these programs.
Yeah, and to me it's clear as day. Microtransit is extremely helpful. It caters to smaller communities, to elderly and those in need. But why hasn't microtransit become? Why is it not mainstream yet?
Yeah, so I would actually say that it has become very much mainstream in more like actually in the last couple of years,
Right.
especially in response to the coronavirus pandemic. And one of the reasons for that is, travel patterns have really changed since then. More people working from home, people are going somewhere else. The trips that people take, that the fabric of like the transportation in industry, it's really changed since then. And what we might see is, and this is useful in rural areas especially, is like, you might have a bus route that has been going the same way for the past 40 years, but now people, maybe ridership dropped off significantly, and those riders might not be coming back if they stopped using it during the pandemic. They might have found another way to get around. They might be going somewhere that isn't served by that limited route. And so microtransit allows the flexibility to set a zone, like an area that you serve, so that people can go from a much more diverse set of start and end points. And so it really has become more popular. I know that in Massachusetts, there's at least 5 or 6 programs, and actually a number of...
Since COVID.
That is a good question.
Because I'm curious. I'm more curious to know definitely COVID, how it impacted microtransit.
Yeah.
That's clear. But prior to COVID, this is it's such a it's such a blessing, such an innovation in public transportation. I mean, it's shocking that it hasn't been around since the 70s, the 60s. I'm going that far back.
Understood and agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, in the past couple of years, it definitely has increased.
Sure. Take just 1 second.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the...
Okay.
Anyways.
Anyway, it definitely has increased in popularity in the past couple of years, but really, I think the important piece is that the technology behind it has only really become available in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And so...
that's like the software, the planning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about a traditional service that we're calling dial-a-ride, that means that there's somebody in an office taking down your request and trying to match it up with maybe 50 others for the day and trying to figure out how they might mesh together.
Sure.
With a couple of vehicles and a very large area and a number of start and end points.
So it's like a lot of linear programming, supply chain too, involved in.
Yeah, for sure. It just becomes something that can't really be done by hand in any useful way at an affordable cost. Right. I mean, it takes a lot of manpower. For that type of situation.
Sure.
Not only to mention, you have to have someone taking phone calls, you have to have someone scheduling, you have to have a dispatcher managing, radio communications, and now you can really sort of condense those 3 roles into one, because if the ride requests are coming in automatically through a smartphone app, and maybe you take some calls, and the dispatcher is really there to, troubleshoot when something goes wrong, as opposed to trying to do everything. It's not really like that. It's a lot more streamlined, and they have, even more recently, they have this automated dispatch type of situation where you could even call in and have, talk to it's like a call center talking to a robot, right? Which is a really interesting idea. But
what do you think about that idea? Because a lot, especially in Great Barrington for the Tri-Town Connector, a large demographic of your riders are senior citizens. Do you think they would be, for talking to a robot on the phone?
It's definitely not an ideal situation for our senior citizens. But I think that what needs to be considered is if instead of like deleting that job of the person who's taking those phone calls, you instead reallocate those resources to more drivers. And that means that they have more service available. I think when you reframe it that way, of course, with plenty of proper training, and when it comes down to it, there always has to be somebody that, they can talk to if something goes wrong. But in terms of providing more service with the same amount of resources, this is an incredibly useful tool. And I think that the automated dispatch without the phone portion, but like reassigning rides when something goes wrong, we've recently started using that. We did not start out with that capability, but we've recently started using it, and it works really, really well, because the person who might be sitting there might also be getting calls from drivers and have a senior calling in, and something else goes wrong. When there's a mechanical failure, now they can just hit a button that says, this vehicle is out of service for X amount of time, and it just automatically figures out what the best way to redistribute those rides are.
Sure. So I'm assuming right now the majority of investing is going into software.
Well, that's correct in terms of like my time and commitment is really trying to get that better up to par so that things can move, things can go a little smoother.
Sure.
And part of that is also if we have, less of a bumpier day for the drivers where it's a system that can automatically reassign when something goes wrong. It also improves our ability to provide customer service to our riders when they get on the vehicle, because the driver isn't as stressed out. It's really made a difference there. And yes, I've been working substantially with our software provider, TripShot, in implementing some of these additional capabilities.
Was that the software that you guys were using when I was doing field work?
No, it is not. Yes.
Okay.
Just very briefly, we did start with one software provider who won the request for quotes in the first round.
So
yes.
I want to make sure. So the software providers, they're looking. It's like what, like contractors are looking for.
It's a contracted service.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, since this is a government program, we do have to, of course, follow Massachusetts general laws regarding purchasing, which one of the things is you have to put the software contract like this out to bid.
Yeah.
And a number of people bid on it. And the one we had chosen the first time around just didn't quite work out for us. But we did put out the bid again after we really realized that, I don't know, sometime late summer, early fall, and we were able to select another software provider who has come into the picture in December and has made a huge difference, night and day difference. Because what I was explaining before about the person having to like juggle these rides in their head or on a bunch of sticky notes, that was sort of what was happening in the beginning, which is not really sustainable, especially when you only have one person there. But what we've seen is we end up with a lot more rides every day. And it's also smoother because the algorithms can, fit things together a little more neatly than we could, looking at, okay, this person's going from here to here, and then think visually like, okay, well, if we can pick this other person up on the way, and it was always very approximate times, and there would be conflicts sometimes, and there, so when the dispatcher enters a ride for someone who calls in now, they just enter where they're going from and where they're going to, and the software pops up with, these 3 drivers are your possibilities. If you click on this one, if you assign it to this one, it'll delay Mary by 7 minutes, or if you click on the next one, they aren't going to get there until 20 minutes after the requested time. So that has really, really been a huge help in reducing the stress level for the dispatcher and for the drivers as well.
So you're the program director of the Tri-Town Connector, TTC,
Yes. I think you coined it that.
Yeah, as I like to say.
Yes.
I'm curious to know about your job role. What is it that you do?
Yeah, so as program director, let's see. At the beginning, I really set the parameters for the program, figured out estimated staffing levels, hired all of the first round of operators, schedulers, dispatchers, really implemented it. So I actually worked on the Berkshire County Micro-Transit planning study for my undergraduate senior thesis a couple of years ago now. And from that, resulted in a proposed pilot program. I wrote grants to get that funded. It was all of our grant applications were funded, which is amazing. There's a huge need in Southern Berkshire County, which was shown through surveys we did. You ask anyone, and they say yes. There's a transportation.
How did you design the surveys to show the extent of need of microtransit?
Yeah, thank you. So I worked with the principal transportation planner at the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. Her name is Anuja Koirala. She's fantastic. I also worked with my thesis advisor and academic advisor. So it was partially, an academic survey design process, but also Anuja, having been here for 20 years in her role, has a very good idea of what are the right questions to ask. Yeah. And so we definitely pulled extensively from her knowledge. And then Bard College at Simon's Rock, where I was at the time, the academic expertise from a number of faculty things.
What are the? And I'm not accusing you of anything. It just it's been brought up to my mind. What are the ethics involved in survey design?
Yeah, so for any survey, including that one, you have to complete what do you call it? And something for the Institutional Review Board.
The IRB.
The IRB.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you have to complete a proposal for the IRB. I've done it at UMass. I've done it at Bard College. And they are very rigorous. So you might come up with a set of questions that you think accurately portrays or would accurately capture what you're looking to what you're looking to find. But they might say, well, this actually exhibits an implicit bias, and here's what we need you to do to reduce that bias or to make it a little less. Obviously, we don't really want to be asking, well, do you like microtransit or do you like no transit? That's not a useful question. And so the IRB definitely serves as a useful check and balance in the process of survey design, because myself and Anuja could come up with great questions, and it all just gets perused with a magnifying glass, getting right down into the nitty gritty. And so I think once they're satisfied after, maybe 5 revisions, then I think we're pretty satisfied too.
So it takes about 5 revisions?
Recent one I did for my master's thesis, I think was 5 or 6. Yeah.
And how long does it take for them to get back to you?
Overall or each time?
After each time.
I was little under a week for each time. So you definitely have to be very good at planning ahead in these situations.
Yeah. I mean, things move a lot slower in academia.
This is true.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when I was working with you over the summer, I was coming from an industry position to, you know, working like in a graduate research setting, and the amount of time I had on my hands, Tate, it was amazing. But the best part about that was, you know, I felt the freedom to be selective about what I wanted to get out of my program and not worry about always bustling around trying to check things off of a box. And I remember at first you had a very rigorous plan for me. We're going to get this done by this date, that done by that date. I think we got like two check boxes. So we got a little sidetracked with the IRB. You're talking about being the program director in the pilot stages.
Yes.
Grading and then applying for the grant, right? So, yeah, please continue.
Sure. So, yes. So I applied for the grants. The grants were funded. And at that point, I guess everyone seemed to think that, well, since I definitely knew the most about this program, having done the year-long planning study, including a field research study that I got funded, where I got to go around the country on Amtrack for 30 days and exploring microtransit programs around the country, which was an amazing experience.
Of course. Oh, I just watch your back. Andrew, yeah. That's Andrew, by the way.
Hi, Andrew. Anyway, so yes, that was an amazing experience, and it really helped shape, in terms of, you know, both overview of lessons learned. I got to meet with the respective program directors, essentially.
And you traveled east to west coast on Amtrak.
Both directions, south, and so I went down. I went to Dallas. I went some places in the southwest, and then up through Utah and Colorado.
And then how long did the entire journey take?
About 30 days.
Of your field work. Oh, and you're going around different... that's free to say. Anyways, so you were traveling around the U.S. on Amtrak doing...
Yes. I'll have to make a plug for Amtrak's 30-day travel pass. At the time, I believe I got a deal where it was maybe $299 for 30 days.
Are you kidding me?
It's currently about $450, $500.
That's still an amazing deal either way.
Oh, 100%,
yeah,
Michael.
I mean, I was just telling you, I spent $160 for a round-trip ticket to New York, and on the way there, I missed my first train because I was too busy playing Nintendo Switch with one of my friends.
Oh, no.
And then I had to buy another ticket.
Oh, boy.
So the transportation costed pretty much the same as a 1-month pass across the entire U.S. Do they offer student deals, Amtrak?
They do. It's 15% off. You have to have the promotion code that is buried somewhere on their website.
Smart. So you were going around, making circles in the U.S., doing field work on different forms of microtransit, right, across different locations. What stood out to you of different, pilot programs, different functioning programs across the U.S. that you wanted to take and implement in Great Barrington?
Yeah, thanks. So
You're welcome.
I will not point any specific program out, but in general, one of the so I mean, I think it ended up being maybe a dozen systems overall, and it was such a wide variety of service options. So I tested out both the dial-a-ride feature, like call in, because almost every system still has an option to call in for the senior populations, primarily, but anybody without a smartphone, including
like you.
Yeah, I did have to buy a burner phone. Yes. So anyway, so I tested it out both with the app and by calling in. And something that really struck me was there were only a couple transit systems, microtransit systems, that had like a decent call-in experience. And I thought,
just customer service, is that what you're trying to?
yeah, I distinctly recall one transit system where I called in for a ride, and I called the number that was listed, and they're like, oh, whatever the microtransit system's name was, like, oh, microtransit, we don't really do that.
So, like, they don't do microtransit at the microtransit service.
Yeah, so I was like, well, she's like, well, you have to use the app. So I say, well, it says on your website that I can call in. So I can hear her put down the phone and go yell across the office if anybody knows how to do this.
Yeah.
So it turns out that they just put their microtransit call center as the paratransit call center, which is service for persons with disabilities that's mandated by the Federal Transit Administration. Anyway, so they just lumped it in and didn't train anybody on how to take the calls or how to enter the rides for this program.
Was it a pilot program?
It was not a pilot program, Michael. Again, so, I mean, I definitely experienced many different iterations and both ends of the spectrum. I guess I will give a shout out to DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit. They have a seamless experience, especially with calling in. They have someone who answers the phone right away, and they are happy to take your information, and they can enter you into the system no problems. So, I mean, there were definitely others, but that was a really seamless experience. And then, of course, I was looking at the apps. So the software that there's really a few major players in the software for microtransit.
Sure.
And so there are a lot of programs that use VIA, and that is one software provider. It's a little expensive, unfortunately, but it is considered like the top notch, just anecdotally, in the transit industry. But I was intentional in my field research design.
You have a thesis. Are you okay if I link it down below? So if anyone...
Sure, happy. Yeah, that's fine. I think it's a public document anyway. So, yeah, of course. But just briefly, I chose the programs that I went to ride. One consideration was I didn't really want to do a ton of systems with the same software provider, because that wasn't really helpful in terms of gauging what the differences are across the different software.
Oh, wait, you didn't want to... can you repeat that?
Sure. So, I wouldn't want to go and ride 12 systems that all use VIA as their software provider, for example. So I think I ended up with about half a dozen software providers that were used over, basically the main ones. And so, the experience is definitely greatly varied that I had. And I think that what was really important, I talked to every operator that I, rode with. I spoke with them, and most drivers are willing and happy to give you a little insight onto what they put up with every day, and a little more insight into the organization. As long as you're nice and courteous. And so that was a really helpful tool as well. Like if the driver didn't know how the software worked, that's a problem, right? I remember one time I scheduled a pickup at a transit center. You would think this would be a pretty straightforward. There's a little sign on one of the bays of the transit center that says pick up for that on-demand transit service. Well, the driver apparently had never been to the transit center and did not know where to go. And so I guess he circled the block a few times. And so like that kind of lack of coordination,
Lack of training too.
lack of training is really what it boils down to. And so that is one major takeaway that I came back with, is that whatever we do, we need to make sure to train our operators and dispatchers well on the services we provide.
And what's the training? What training does the TTC provide for drivers?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, it consists about 35 to 40 hours of training per operator. Just when they're getting started, there's additional training as they continue along, but really that includes some of the Rural Transit Assistance Program required courses through the Federal Transit Administration and Mass DOT. So that includes like a wheelchair lift securement. That's a full day training. We want them to know how to get those wheelchairs up into the vehicle and out, and so we have them role play in wheelchairs, and that's a really strong training that we provide. And then we also have a defensive driving course that they need to take, a drug and alcohol awareness course, disability awareness.
You can't drink and drive.
No, Michael. Really though.
Yeah.
I mean, they of course get drug testing before they can even start any type of training. They get a DOT physical. So this is a rigorous, like, not just like touch your toes, but an eye exam, a lot of different things, and they have to get that regularly renewed. And there's random drug testing, but also in terms of training, they often will ride along with an existing driver for at least 10 to 15 hours. So that's really just to get acquainted with our clientele, right? We want them to be comfortable with interacting with seniors, especially if they haven't had that much type of experience. It's a very different, it's a very customer service centric role, an operator.
But on top of that, there's senior customer service.
Well, exactly. It's not just working the service desk at your local supermarket. You really have to cater to those individuals. And so, we provide that, and then they swap roles, and they have an experienced driver. I'm riding with them for 10 to 15 hours. We try to get everyone in for a scheduler training just in case, so they can cover shifts here and there. And then we do provide continuous training, which includes, refreshers on the wheelchair securement if anyone needs it. We also provide, I try to do at least once every other month. We have a required training online through a National Rural Transit Assistance Program. They provide an excellent library. So, I think this month it's an active shooter training. These things are really important.
Well, it really stands out to me that you guys do have continuous training, because I can speak out to my academic experience. We learn a subject, move on, and I forget it most of the time. It's just how it is. At least the first 2 years of my college experience. And
it's often the experience.
Yeah, and it's not that the information isn't important. It's just there's no continuous refresher. There's always something new, building up.
Certainly.
And is this something that you got from the other microtransit programs, or is it something that you firmly believe in?
So I definitely believe in continuous training, but I think that the systems that really stood out as performing really well in talking with their respective directors, got the idea that they were providing this regular training, which just reinforces the idea that this needs exactly. We don't want someone to learn how to secure a wheelchair one day and forget the next week. But yeah, so I definitely believe in continuous training refreshers whenever we can. It does get difficult sometimes when we're super busy.
Sure.
But we provided our last training was an emergency management class. The one before this current active shooter training.
So if there's an active shooter on board the bus.
Yes, or in the area. Like it doesn't have to be on board the bus. It could be at the bus stop, that kind of situation. But I really want my operators to be prepared if something happens. And this isn't mandated by the state or anything. This is just something that we do in order to make sure that we are prepared regardless of whether it's a requirement. So, yeah.
Are you standardizing processes across the TTC?
Yes. So the service began in May of 2023.
Yeah, give us a rundown.
So
the pilot program of the Tri-Town Connector.
Sure. So the Tri-Town Connector began in May of 2023 as an on-demand transit service, expanding out of an existing limited senior transit program that operated weekdays 8 a.m. to 3 p.m.
At Claire Teague?
Yes, at the senior center, but you had to call 2 days in advance. And so, it was a really limited set of resources for our seniors who don't drive anymore. So the service initially began we operated weekdays about 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends 8 to 8. Those hours have been tweaked just a little bit, but the idea was provide the largest span of service, like the most amount of hours per day as we possibly could to get an idea of demand, because it's kind of like a sandbox type of pilot service, because if the local fixed route bus, the local bus route stops running around 5:30, 6 p.m. And so running until 9 p.m. is pretty radical for this area that hasn't had that kind of service before.
It's like New York City.
Yeah. So instead of ending at 7 p.m., we did consider one idea was a 7 to 7. But while we didn't necessarily forecast a ton of demand between 6 and 7 and between 7 and 9, we never know if we don't, test it out. And I'll just say anecdotally, ridership has been booming way into the night, especially the last couple months.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we have our evening driver, fully booked through about 8:45 p.m. every night.
Is it seniors or kids at Simon's Rock?
It's combination. There's a lot of people who are working at like supermarket service industry type or hospitality roles. Who I know we serve one individual who works at a supermarket, and he used to ride his bike, rain or shine, in the snow, 8 to 10 miles each way every day. And he pushes carts all day. Sure. So it's a physically demanding job. And then he would bike home up a couple hills, and so this has really changed people like that. It's really changed their lives. We also offer service on Sundays, which has never been offered before. I can speak to our Sunday service. It's the lowest ridership of the week, but it's still really strong at like 30 to 40 rides every Sunday, which is really major when you didn't have anything before.
And also Sunday service, right? There might be people of faith who want to worship. We do
transport a couple to churches, and honestly, I think that hasn't been marketed much, and I would not be surprised if we tried to market that to our seniors, that could become a real boom.
Like the TTC Sunday service will take you to Sunday service.
There you go, Michael. Yeah. So
also the radius you guys cover. You're mentioning this guy who's who's biking to work 10 miles a day, rain or shine, sun or snow. I mean, I remember when I was doing my field work, we drove like 20 minutes to Argamont, one of the, because you guys are encompass 3 towns, 5 towns.
We now serve 7 communities.
Good for you guys, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you guys drove 25 minutes. I mean, to me, that's revolutionary. And what the lady paid about $240 just to,
Yeah.
man.
I mean, this is not viewed at this point necessarily as a public transit service that's trying to get people off the roads. It's more of a social service type of situation for these people who don't have other means. It's designed to improve quality of life for residents of the community. And I'll just add briefly. So when we started in May of 2023, the design.
Keep going. I'm listening. I'm just gonna get seltzer.
Okay. The design for the service, the microtransit zone, was about 27 square miles. Well, there has been so much demand and so many requests from all of the area in our communities outside of that 27 square mile zone.
So you guys are at 27 square miles right now.
No, we're at 100 square miles.
Times 4, baby.
Yeah, literally. So, I mean, this is really wild, Michael. I mean, so it has been a challenge. We constantly, at this point, we don't have the capacity for all of the rides that come in. We serve, this has definitely helped with our new software, but we currently are averaging 70 to 80 rides a day on weekdays, in the 50s.
Across the entire fleet.
Yes. And then in the 50s on Saturdays and 30 to 40 on Sunday.
Yeah.
Last month was a record-breaking month with about 1,400 rides. And, this is really remarkable because, what I'm trying to figure out now is, what were these people doing before? Like, we have 1,400 trips. How are these people getting around before this service started? And I think another important part to add is that city bus that goes through our service zone, it still exists. It was not reduced or eliminated as part of this.
Yeah, because it's on the public sector.
Yeah, well, in other areas, they replace like scheduled bus service with microtransit. But I think what's really remarkable is that the service's ridership has been increasing, along with our rapid increase in
for
rides.
The fixed route bus.
The fixed route bus has increasing ridership.
I actually have a question on that topic. So let's say you theoretically introduce a microtransit program,
yes,
a microtransit service, and then the ridership for the fixed route decreases. I mean, to me, I feel that they are inversely correlated. I don't know how it's that's, I guess, a conversation for later, but maybe they should eliminate the fixed route transit and use the money for that and put it into the microtransit. What would you think about that as a model?
Yeah, thanks. So the long-term...
You're welcome.
The long-term model for the program, which is outlined in the planning study, which is also my thesis, but it's also a planning study for the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. The long-term plan is to replace the local bus service with the microtransit. So eliminate at least this was the original plan.
Yeah.
It's been really remarkable to us that ridership has continued increasing. And it turns out, when speaking just sort of anecdotally with some of our riders, it sounds like we're really complementing that service, and that people will take the B bus, which is the fixed route bus, to somewhere and then call us for a ride back. It's a really interesting, it's a really interesting sort of partnership that's going on here. but the long-term vision is to reduce or eliminate the fixed route local bus service, replace it with a express route to the center of the county, which is Pittsfield, via some of the other smaller towns. Add another microtransit zone a little further up the county in Lee and Lenox that have sort of a similar situation, a little bit higher ridership, but it's pretty rural there still also. And so they would also benefit from, instead of some route that either winds around or doesn't really stop very many places, have that alternative option for the microtransit. And so currently it takes about a little over 2 hours to go the 20 miles from Great Barrington to Pittsfield on the fixed route bus, because there's an express bus that runs 3 or 4 times a day, which obviously is not adequate for even if someone wants to commute to work. It runs at like 5 and 7 a.m. and then at I'm blanking on the exact time, but it's like 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. So even if you get to work at 8 a.m., you don't have an option until 6 p.m. to get back. And so, it's not entirely, it's great that it exists, but really what needs to happen is that service needs to be expanded upon. And the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority agrees that, that should be expanded upon. And so, but of course, we don't necessarily have a bunch of new buses come out of thin air, and the service does cost taxpayer money, so we're not looking to duplicate anything, but rather shift those resources, some of those resources, to the express bus, which would take about half the resources of the current service, then shift the other half of the resources to the on-demand type service model.
Got it. I'm also curious to know, because 2 reasons why I don't use public transportation. A, there's very little around me. B, I feel it's difficult for me to navigate the system. I feel uncomfortable. It's something new. Are you guys looking into human factors engineering for the TTC to make it as easy to use as possible, with just use it and plan it, not even think about it?
Yeah. So part of, launching our user app, which has only been relaunched in the past couple of weeks and has been a huge success. At this point, about 10% of our rides are through the app.
10%?
Yeah. So if we have 80 rides a day, that's 8 of them through the app, and that's steadily growing every day.
Yeah. Well, I think you have the seniors, right? So they mostly call
Yeah. Seniors are about half of our ridership at this point.
Right.
But the other half is, what we've heard is they'd much rather book it by themselves. They don't have to call anybody. They don't have to talk to anybody or ask questions if they don't want to, or they don't have to, if the line is busy. I mean, if we get 5 calls in at once, some are going to go to voicemail.
Yeah.
And some people don't like leaving voicemails.
I don't like leaving voicemails.
Yeah. So, providing that option really makes it a lot more convenient for just someone to set up the app. All the information is on our website. That we did a press release, and just get going without having to. And the app has a little walkthrough of here are the things you need to know about the service. And this is different than the fixed route bus service in terms of ease of use, because you have to look up the schedule. If you're don't live near a bus stop, you probably won't know that it will stop anywhere along its route, which it will, but you only know that if you either stand there and try or you talk to somebody. Up till now, the Tri-Town Connector has really only advertised through word of mouth. We have not done much. We haven't really spent anything on advertising.
Yeah.
And that was intentional, especially for the first year of service. I mean, if our ridership was super low, we would have, certainly. But we wanted to see what was going to happen because at this point, as I mentioned to you, Michael, we are over capacity in terms of the number of requests we receive every single day. And so if we were to advertise, well, great. But if we don't have the vehicles or drivers available, that's not a great use of our money. We don't want to make it so that people find out and are interested and set up an account and then they can't get any rides. But what I will mention is that we have applied for an innovation grant from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, which would allow us to basically double our staff for at least a year. It's part of the new millionaires tax, which I don't know if you're aware of that at all.
No. Can you tell me?
Yeah, briefly, maybe 2 years ago, it was an item on the ballot in Massachusetts asking if voters would approve an additional 4% tax for anyone who makes over $1 million, for any income over $1 million. And the stipulations were that it would go to, quote me, either education and transportation or something like that.
Sure.
But it included transportation. And what that's done is that's generated a lot of revenue that's been earmarked specifically for transit. Which, oftentimes in the past, transit has been the first to have money cut. But if that money is required to be for transit, that is actually a huge boon for the regional transit authorities and for the MBTA. And so the regional transit authorities all got like 50% increase in funding from the state this year, and next year it's looking like, and just going forward. And the other part is that they set aside $15 million for innovative programs like our program. And so the expectation is that would continue. And
the 4% millionaire tax, the benefit of that is it's primarily going to education and just infrastructure
and transportation. So a lot of it goes to not just public transit, a lot of it goes to maintaining our roads and bridges.
This was enacted 3 days ago, right?
No.
Wait, when was this?
It was a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't enacted. I don't remember exactly when it was enacted. I think it would have been not this past year, but the year before.
Yeah. I think the rich are going to find a way out of paying that 4% because it's pretty interesting. So income taxes, there weren't income taxes in the U.S. I forgot, Americans were not very fond of being taxed on their income. And then at first it was advertised, income tax, as a way to heavily, stipend, well, not stipend, but, to take money from the rich. Right? That's how people got on board. But the rich, they're smart. They have corporations and just funnel their money through those corporations. So
yes, I'm aware.
Yeah, I just started learning about this. I'm reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't know if you've read it, but
I have not.
It's just blowing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So have you noticed an increase in your grants being fulfilled as a result, maybe to some extent, by this 4%?
Yeah, so the first year of our service, which was
basically, is the 4% tax actually working?
It does appear so. This 15 million, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, is not a ton. MBTA gets many billions. They get a lot, but 15 million is a lot for the rural areas.
You guys got 15 million.
No, it's an innovation grant program that Mass DOT has set up.
That's what you're applying to.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're no longer a pilot. We are a full program.
Hey, congratulations!
Thank you.
Congratulations, Tate.
Yes.
You earned it.
Thanks. So that happened in November. Our service has been such a success.
Yeah.
I think it's even just speaks to it without advertising.
Right.
Like, that's wild. I
Right.
mean, that's a big complaint that many people have. I will admit, I have definitely complained about the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority fixed route service. That they do not advertise very much. But it's common around the country, around the state.
Yeah.
But on-demand transit is a little different because it's tailored to each person's, origin and destination.
Sure.
A fixed route service, it's going to run the same way every day, regardless of whether someone rides it or not. So you can put 15 people in that vehicle, and you don't have to add more capacity. You might have to take a bigger bus if a ton more people started riding. But on-demand transit is a little different in that way. Of course, that's why on-demand transit, like microtransit, isn't a great solution in densely populated areas, right? Because if you have, like on the UMass campus, if you have 40 people packed into a bus, why do you want to put them all in a different vehicle or even share 4 at a time, right? And so the issue was that 3 people every hour were getting on and off the BRTA bus, which is not much on an 18-seat bus. And that's an average. So you might have 1 hour with 6 and 1 hour with 0.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. So, so anyway, what I'm getting at here is, on-demand transit is a little different in terms of scalability. It needs more resources, but you can run it with smaller vehicles usually, which mitigates cost. Our cost per service hour is around $40 an hour.
So that's labor included, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
So cost,
So labor, gas,
labor,
vehicle
gas, maintenance.
$40 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That would be higher. What about for a fixed but per vehicle?
$40 per service hour per revenue hour is the industry term.
Per revenue hour.
So that does not include when the driver gets there and does their pre-trip inspection.
Okay.
And it does not include if they're doing some paperwork or doing a training. That's not a revenue hour. But those hours are factored into the overall cost.
So revenue hours when the company's making money, right?
Technically.
When they're getting some sort of income.
Yes, correct.
Input. So the purpose of this podcast is to bring people who are making an impact in the Amherst area in the Western Massachusetts area, and you've clearly done that. And in order to do that, you need to be good at writing grants,
that is very true.
Getting money, right? What is the process like of writing a grant? And how do you find grants?
Sure.
What's involved?
So
because this very eloquent term, I got an innovation grant. It's nothing.
Fingers crossed for the innovation grant.
Not
yeah, don't jinx
I'm
it
a
here.
little superstitious.
Yeah. But in terms of grants in general, so I actually, so just to give a little background about myself, I have been volunteering with the town of Great Barrington for over 6 years at this point. So I've worn a lot of hats.
Yeah.
I was the chair of the Cultural Council for a while.
Yeah.
And that was a very formative experience because the Cultural Council awards grants.
Yeah.
Like 30 grants to artists or musicians throughout the town of Great Barrington, and we usually get 100+ applications.
Wait, so grants aren't just for public services? They're
not necessarily. Yeah, there's
good to know.
Yeah,
good to know.
Yeah, so I mean, we only award it, to something that will benefit the community, of course. But that was actually my first official foray into town government.
So you'd be looking, like filtering through people to determine who can qualify for a
Yep.
grant.
And so we really ended up having
You
we
think I
ended up
could get
having to
one?
come.
Please.
You could definitely
Yeah.
apply. I mean, we ended up having to come up with a scoring rubric, and it's not an easy process. It's not an easy decision. You might have 100 applications. Maybe you can, sort of shelve 20 of them, and you say, well, those aren't really what we're looking for. But then you've still got 80, and you can only award 30. And so at some point, it becomes a little arbitrary.
Right.
But for most of the process, you can, score different parts. And so I think the key to grant applications is being extremely thorough.
Okay.
That includes providing data. Surveys they always love surveys.
Yep.
I mean, our survey that was for the Berkshire County Micro-Transit planning study got over 2,200 responses, which is remarkable for our area. I think that I definitely played a role in that and being very persistent in getting this out. I think we had at least 24 local businesses who hosted the survey. We got Big Y to donate a gift card so people could enter to win $100 Big Y gift card. This was like a real, we printed out paper surveys, including in Spanish. I would go down to the food pantry where I volunteered every Monday, and I would go down and I would hand out the survey because I was the person who's
if you want food, you will answer my survey.
No, of course not. That would never pass IRB muster, Michael. But, these are the people who you're trying to reach, right? And so, that I think played a huge role. That is an outstanding number of responses for a rural area.
Yeah, 2,200?
Yeah. So
isn't Great Barrington like 30,000 people?
7,000.
What?
Yeah.
That's smaller than UMass Amherst.
Yeah, I've thought about it a number of times. My hometown could fit into UMass like 5 times. Yeah.
It's like one Southwest building.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Anyway, so I think the key to writing grants is being thorough, convincing, but always backing up with data.
Yeah.
If you can provide us a convincing argument, was the case whenever I've written grants, whenever I've reviewed grants. In the end, whatever you're doing, that's nice.
Yeah.
And there are definitely merits to the different things. But if you can show us something that shows that there's a need, like in the case of the Cultural Council, if they can show, I got a grant last year for this performance and I had 300 people turn out. It's like, wow. I mean, you have to look at the merits of the act, what they're doing, make sure it aligns with your goals. But that is a huge...
little closer to the mic, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, of course.
No, you don't need to be there. Just say a little, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so I've written a lot of grants, and a couple of them haven't got funded for sure.
Sure.
But a lot of them have. And I was fortunate enough to work in the planning office in Great Barrington for 2.5 years under the director of planning and community development.
You have the longest LinkedIn I've ever seen, but the longest LinkedIn I've on the planet, Tate.
Honestly, I don't keep a paper resume. I just keep everything on LinkedIn.
Yeah. You just you scroll. And what? One more time.
Yeah. So, anyway, I was fortunate enough to work with Chris Rembold is his name. He's now my boss. Okay. Like officially. But he has brought in millions, basically at least a couple million every year for the town of Great Barrington. I would have to look at the exact numbers, but I know he's brought in many millions. He's been working for the town, I don't know, maybe 15 years. And I mean, he's a big reason why our town has so many great programs that, other communities might not. he's the master in our little community
Sure.
For grant applications, and so I learned from one of the best, I think. So yeah, I mean, I started out in the planning office. I wrote a grant for a water quality evaluation and monitoring study for like a couple $100,000. If I don't remember the exact numbers, but I did add it up at one point. A lot of grant applications, definitely over $500,000.
And I'm assuming they're not taxed, right? They just
No,
it would be fun if they did, right?
no, it comes in revenue for the town, right?
20% tax on your grants.
Well, municipalities don't really get taxed. So that's counterproductive. Government taxing government. Yeah, so I think that that is really the key. There's a lot of nuance in grant applications, and that's not the only skill you need to know, but providing the convincing information, not just saying it but showing it, that's what makes a huge difference.
So you know so much about microtransit. It's absurd. In a good way. In a good way. I'm not
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. What got you into microtransit?
Yeah, so I have always
Of all things, microtransit, what got you into it?
I have always been a transit enthusiast. So I was born and originally from New York City.
Yeah.
And so, my parents could tell you my idea of fun on the weekends would be dragging them out to Coney Island on a different iteration as a toddler.
Wow.
Every weekend we did a different route. And so I'm happy and I'm glad that they put up with me for that.
What about transit is so appealing to you?
That's a hard question.
It's
And
just there. It's intuitive.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people have a passion.
Yeah.
And
No, I think it's
most
so
of
cool
them-
you found that from a young age.
yeah, most people probably can't tell you exactly why.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of it is definitely moving people.
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer,
Yeah,
but
it's intuitive. I get it, yeah.
what that translated into when my family moved to Great Barrington,
Oh, yeah.
Massachusetts.
Why from NYC to Great Barrington, the most suburban town in Massachusetts?
Well, it's not really suburban; it's more rural.
Rural,
but
correction. Yeah, the most rural town in
big
Massachusetts.
difference as a planner, I
Yeah.
would say. I don't really have a great answer for you,
Wow.
but that wasn't my decision.
Fresh air, right?
That's
Fresh
right.
air.
That's right. But it definitely shaped how. It definitely shaped how I grew up, right? And so I'll just say that.
More alternatives for routes to Coney Island.
Oh yeah, infinitely more, right?
Oh, how far is Great Barrington from NYC?
It's about 2.5 hours. They've been trying to get a rail link back in for about 2 decades. We almost got it, but then Connecticut
like
dropped
Amtrack?
there.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Metro North
Okay.
would connect from Wassaic or from Southeast. Anyway, from one of the other stations. They almost had it figured out, and then Connecticut decided they weren't going to chip in the part they had committed. It goes through the line goes through a little tiny snippet of Connecticut. New York put up the money. Massachusetts put up the money. It's like this little tiny corner in Connecticut.
There's something they're hiding. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, anyway, it was
Gold.
very frustrating for all of us. But regardless, when I moved to Great Barrington, I think one of the first things I did was, where's the transit? Obviously, there's no trains, but I did do some research. And believe me, you did have to do research about the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority. It wasn't very obvious that there was a bus service, and also that you could get it you could flag it down anywhere. As I mentioned earlier, you can flag it down anywhere. That includes outside my house.
Yeah.
That's pretty convenient.
Yeah.
Anyway, so so I was in 4th grade at the time. Anyway, I started riding the BRTA bus just around town.
Sure.
I mean, maybe this is silly, but even when I was in 3rd grade, the summer before 4th grade, I was beginning to gain independence.
Yeah.
And I would ride the New York City subway by myself.
I wasn't allowed to leave my driveway.
Oh, yeah.
When I was in the 4th grade.
Yeah. I mean, I think my parents knew that I knew the system well. They did not want to ride along with me.
You could probably rob a bank and escape via transit.
I'll have to tell you a story about someone sometime. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I would go down to the supermarket. I would go to the bowling alley or whatever. I have not been. I know I have a flip phone now. I have never really been a tech person. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly why.
You're an old soul.
I guess so. Yeah. I prefer to be in the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have to use a computer a lot for my job. But if I had it my way...
pen, pencil, and typewriter.
Yeah, right? If I had it my way, I wouldn't. But... but that being said, so... Yes, I greatly enjoyed, and at some point I ended up I would go up to Pittsfield to Walmart and take the express bus and go up to, I definitely brought my grandmother up a couple times because I wasn't allowed to go to North Adams, which is 50 miles away by myself. Okay. But we would go to the Clark Art Museum and I didn't really care about the museum. I cared about riding the buses, right? Yeah. But I befriended the drivers, became really good friends. Anyway, let's see. The summer before 8th grade.
You ever ask the bus drivers to take you home? Just go off the track.
This isn't on the record, but sure. Well, as a little kid who was not allowed to cross the busy roads, I did get door-to-door service, which was really nice.
Yeah.
But anyway... So the summer before 8th grade, I had just gotten tuned in for some reason, that there were not that many people riding the bus. And I just sort of had a thought. There were 0 bus stop signs at the time in Great Barrington. So of course, how would anybody know about the service if they didn't literally look it up on the internet? That's a big, caveat there. And so I ended up writing an email to our town manager in Great Barrington, which is like the mayor, and also then I emailed to the BRTA administrator, and then I decided, well, what the heck? So I wrote an op-ed. I submitted
what's an op-ed?
Yes, a letter to the editor to our local newspapers, and. Anyway, everyone thought it was a great idea to get bus stop signs. And so I was given free reign to...
in 8th grade?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I was given free reign to work with one of the city council select board members in designing the signs, figuring out where to put them. Yeah. And then they would print them out, and put them up. And so we ended up with... over 30 bus stop signs in the town of Great Barrington. And that was just,
No, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well,
for an eighth grader, like for a 20-year-old, that's still pretty important for an 8th grader.
But the fact, I think that was, let's see, at the time I think right after that, I ended up joining the Cultural Council.
As an 8th grader?
Yes.
Hey, guys. I think...
that was a long.
It's my bedtime.
Oh, come on.
Anyways.
Yeah, and I became chair of the cultural council.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I was chair for a couple of years.
So, this is an important question, right? Because you're an 8th grader on a chair council. I'm assuming people are questioning your authority. Were they not taking you seriously?
So this was actually the most like wild experience. You know, looking back, it's really wild. So I, let's see. Yeah, I mean, this was summer before 8th grade, and then, by the way, in 8th grade, I got to do a science project about the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority. About the fuel economy. So, you know, everybody's doing like a lava lamp or whatever, paper mache lava.
Yeah. Hey, I'm proud of my lava lamp.
Oh, I do not mean no disrespect. But yeah, so I said, well, I'd like to do a study on the efficiencies of the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority services and figure out which routes were efficient or inefficient relative to each person driving their own car. And so the BRTA administrator, Bob Malnati, was a huge help. He was so wonderful in he would meet with me every week. I would go up to Pittsfield.
Really?
And we would sit down for an hour or two and go over what I wanted to, you know, he helped guide. He was the one who taught me Excel.
Yeah.
You know, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, and you had it's great they had mentorship too. You had direction.
Well, we all had to pick a mentor,
Yeah.
right? And most people picked a parent or something. I asked Bob, and he was just, you know.
Was he delighted at that?
He was delighted.
Of course.
He just, I don't
Like,
think he'd ever experienced.
Yeah, imagine like an 8th grader going to professional, like something so.
He's worked at BRTA for over 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in 8th grade, all I cared about was like basketball and video games. Right.
Right.
I mean, in 8th grade, like now it's interesting, but if you're trying to talk about transit with me in 8th grade, I'm like,
yeah. So anyway, that was a super cool study, and it yielded some interesting results, which actually seems informed some service changes. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yeah. So that first, like, myself just saying, hey, I think we should get bus stops. You know, and then that turning into, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
That was an extremely formative moment.
Yeah, because it shows you these things are possible. They're tangible. It's not
you
just
can just
abstract in your mind.
Yeah, you can like make a difference in your community by just bringing up an idea. And you know, in 4th grade, or in 8th grade, no less. Yes,
it's 6:55.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. I can. I'm more than willing to keep going. I just like I don't know.
Probably should get going.
All right.
I have a 6 a.m. shift at Target tomorrow.
Let's
But if you want to give me, if you have any last couple of questions.
I have a bunch more questions.
Sorry.
We can get together later. No. Like,
sure.
Tate, my goal is not to get to these questions. It's just to like let you talk about what you're passionate about. That's what matters.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up with this question.
Sure.
What are your future plans and goals?
Yeah. So I will have been the. Okay, let me start.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little closer to the mic, please.
Okay. So in August of this year, I'll be graduating. As long as nothing goes wrong, I'll be graduating with my 2 master's degrees, one in regional planning and one in civil engineering, and a graduate certificate in transit operations and management. And so at that point, I do plan to move out of Western Massachusetts.
They'll miss you.
Yeah, I don't know how the TTC will function, Michael.
Al's got it.
Al's got it. So I have an opportunity lined up with the Utah Transit Authority. Yeah. So
you tell me about that.
I will be moving to Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I actually was out in Utah over the winter break, and I had breakfast with their executive director, Jay Fox.
Wow.
Amazing guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we figured out what's going to happen here. And anyway, I'm looking forward to it, but I do plan to take a couple months break in between. This has
Be
been
a human being, right?
probably work at. I can transfer to a Target there. Keep that
it's
going.
It's kind of nice. It's like,
it's really nice. Not have to stare at a computer all day.
I know.
So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. But in the long term, probably, if I graduate in August, probably by January, I'll be at Utah Transit Authority, either in operations or service planning, or the Department of Innovative Mobility Solutions.
And it's on research, right?
So the Department of Innovative Mobility Solutions is research. Okay. The operations service planning is reconfiguring the service networks, which Jay believes I would be a very good fit for, because I actually worked on the PVTA service redesign a year and a half ago now. And I basically did most of the GIS, the geographic information systems, the actual rerouting based on a 15-person based on the survey, with a 5-person team as well. But I did spearhead that effort, and I guess that's pretty impressive for them in terms of that role would be a good fit. Anyway, so we'll see. I am looking forward to working at UTA. I think from what I've seen, it is an amazing organization with top-notch leadership, which often makes quite the difference. And they have a Department of Innovative Mobility Solutions. This is not a common thing. They have people dedicated to coming up with innovative ideas for transit, for redesigning transit systems. And looks like they're probably going to get the Olympics in a few years, the Winter Olympics.
What?
Yeah, Salt Lake City.
Oh, Utah.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, UTA is getting the Olympics?
No. But, of course, leading up to the Olympics, that will require a lot. They'll probably end up with additional rail services, additional bus services. They're debating a gondola right now. So, there's a lot of growth happening there in my little corner of the world. The transit industry, there's a lot happening there, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, Tate, I'm very excited to see what's to come of your career in transit in general. I mean, the future is very, very bright for you. I consider myself very fortunate to have been your mentee, and I really sincerely thank you for coming onto the podcast. You were an amazing guest. Now, if there's anything you want to plug, do so. Just face the camera. If nothing, don't worry.
Of course. Thank you, Michael. I do think that whether you ride transit or not, throughout your life, sometimes it will be convenient. Maybe it is here now if you're at PVTA, if you're at UMass, the PVTA is pretty convenient. But even if not, being mindful of the services that public transit provides for individuals who may not be as fortunate as yourself. In large cities, these cities wouldn't function without, New York City would not function without its subway network. But if you end up in a smaller area and questions come up about funding for transit, it's important to consider the quality of life that, the drastic differences in quality of life that transit service can bring.
Sure. Also, one thing I do want to emphasize, if there's something you want to get done, it's possible. Tate did it in 8th grade with bus stops, right? Like the world is your oyster. That really stood out to me during our discussion. Tate, I really appreciate you coming on. Guys, thank you for watching this episode of the podcast. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me anything that can be done better. Give feedback, constructive criticism. Appreciate it all. If you just want to say hi. Currently going through a little bit of a rebranding of the podcast, so do stay tuned. with what's going on, guys. We're on the road to like 35 subscribers. We're going to get there very soon. And yeah, thank you for watching the episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye. All right, Tate. Awesome.
Oh, man.